We start? Yes? Cool, let's do this. So welcome to our fifth session, which is today on managing constraints, planning and control, and generally it's about capacity management. Okay, everything regarding bringing together supply and demand. Okay, basically as simple as it sounds, as difficult as it actually is. Okay, so today we're going to spend some time exploring the difficulties of managing capacity. Okay, and we do that in the contextual environment of planning and controlling the capacity levels, right? And when we talk about capacity, we also have to talk about constraints. Okay. Let me go firstly, before going into what is capacity, what is planning, through like just a graphical illustration of what we see here, a simple process, right? So disregard what is here, I just wanted to show you a process, right? So we said the process that operations management is about managing and then is the arrangement of tasks and activities that gets transformed, which are in a specific sequence in order to achieve a specific outcome. So if you look at this process here, okay, what do these arrows mean? What do these arrows stand for? Do you have an idea? What do these arrows mean? These orange arrows, what do they stand for, guys? What do you guys think? Yes, so I go from one to the next, but what's very important here? They show a sequence, right? And the sequence means that task B can only start when task A is finished. Task C can only start when task B is finished. And task D can only start when task C is finished. So the tasks are dependent on each other, right? So B depends on C, C depends on B and A, depends on C, B, and A. That's basically what it means, right? And down here, you have some things called processing times, right? How long it takes to execute this process, right? So let's say today is Friday night, we want to make pizzas, right? Then we see here the processing time of making the pizza. The first one maybe need to roll out the dough, right? In the second step, we need to put all the garnishes on it. In the third step, the pizza needs to be baked, right? And in the fourth step, the pizza needs to be served, right? It needs to be put on the plate and then brought to the customer, right? Which task in this process of making the pizza takes the longest? Which one takes the longest? Which step in this process takes the longest? A, B, C, or D? It's very simple. You just see the numbers. Which one takes the longest? Come on, guys, wake up. A, right? Now, what happens over time with task B? Right? Let's say task A, what we said was rolling out the dough, and B was then putting the garnishes on. What happens over time to task B? What happens to the person that works in task B? What happens over time? What happens over time to the person working at task B? What do you think? No, what happens to task B? The person. The person here, each time they make a pizza, the person has 1 minute nothing to do. Like, can't work because it always has to wait, because this one takes 5 minutes and always has to wait for A to finish. So in operations management, we call this that task B has idle time, right? They are underutilized, right? Does that make sense? They are not utilized to 100%. So every pizza, they have to wait 1 minute, right? Can't do and can't work, right? It can also be the other way around. Now, what happens if you disregard task A and B? Only look at the relationship between task C and D. What happens over time between task C and D? What happens over time between task A and between task B? Between those two, what happens over time there? It's the opposite scenario, right? What happens there over time? What do you guys think? What happens between those two over time? So if we disregard the rest, we would accumulate WIP inventory, or even we would accumulate finished good inventory, right? If we say here, this is where the pizza comes out of the oven, but it takes us too long, so the pizza always has to wait 1 minute. So the hot pizza is always waiting to be brought to the customer, right? And that's basically what happened when supply and demand do not equalize, right? If supply is higher than the demand, I accumulate inventory. If it is the other way around, if we have stages such as here, that task A cannot fulfill the demand of task B, then task B is underutilized, right? It's not working to its full capacity, right? And there we have a definition of capacity. Capacity is the maximum output I can produce in a given time unit, right? Per hour, per whatever it is. So that's the capacity, right? It's my maximum output that I have. And this is what we will discuss today, how we manage a process, right? Now let's go to the start and finish up and start our, oopsie, I went too far. We already did this, right? Here I am. So we're looking at planning and control, whatever it is, the process, right? So in terms of the purpose of planning and control is to ensure that all the operations processes run effectively and efficiently. So we look at these two types of performance damage, right? Efficiency is the time and cost, and effectively is all the other ones, right? So we are providing a system, procedure, and decision to bring together supply and demand. So that's what we are going to do today. So we're gonna see how we can manage processes in order to equalize supply and demand, okay? Now, demand side is what the market requires. And what we do with the demand side, the demand, we have to forecast, right? Or we have to plan, depending if we are in a push or in a pull environment. And then supply side is my capacity, my ability to deliver products and services, okay? Now, planning is then the difference between planning and control is difference in time horizons, right? So planning is activities that should take place. So we are planning how many resources do we need, where do we allocate these resources, when should I start producing this, when should I start delivering this. And control is controlling and managing what's actually happening right at this moment, right? So we control the performance of a process. So here we see whether there's a deviation between what we have planned and what is actually happening. So what is planned is the planning part, and the controlling is then when I try to understand the performance of an operation. So planning is, for example, how should I design the process? Control is what's the performance of the process, okay? So we are looking at whether there is a deviation, which often is, right, between resources in order to affect the operations activities, right? Here you see a graphical illustration of what I said, right? The difference between control and planning is a time horizon, right? Controlling is what I do right now, the hours that I do, right? That I'm controlling what's the cycle time, what's the throughput time, what's the throughput rate currently. And the planning is then how do I make my forecast? How do I arrange and design my processes? What are the operational performance objectives and how do I set them? Medium in the middle is then the disregarded, disaggregated demand forecast. We determine the resources and buffers, i.e. contingencies and the objective nodes, right? Then is what I'm actually doing. Do I need to make an intervention into the resources from the plans and do constraint management, okay? So there are two different types of demand. So the supply side is the capacity. We go into that later. But from the demand side, we have dependent demand and independent demand. Think about dependent demand, right? Demand for tires is governed by the number of automobiles planned to be made, right? So let's say per car, you need 5 tires. Like if you have one spare tire, then if you want to produce, I don't know, 100 cars a day, then you would need 500 tires per that day. So the amount of tires that you need depends on the amount of cars that you produce, right? On the other hand, we have what it's called independent demand, right? So that would be, let's say, we are a tire fitting service, okay? Meaning that we whenever a car needs a new tire, they can come to us and we'll put a new tire, right? And here the demand of the tires is no longer governed dependent on how many cars I produce, right? Now it is governed by the cars arriving. So the fluctuations in the number of cars arriving and how many cars they actually need. So here the demand is largely governed by random factors, okay? Now, recall we discussed this already, right? So make or produce to stock, produce to order, or resource to order. So we always think about lead time from two perspectives, right? The sourcing lead time, the production lead time, and then the delivery lead time, which are here in these 3 circles, right? Now, think about how we can respond to demand. And we see the ratio between the time, the demand time, and then the fulfillment time. Okay, which is then the throughput time, or we call this lead time. So here, think about we produce to stock. If we have produced something to stock already, the time the customer has to wait is relatively short, because you can go to a 7-Eleven and then you pick up your iced tea or whatever it is, right? But then on the other hand, if something is produced to order, let's say you purchase a car, then the demand time increases because you put the configuration of your car in, and then you wait for those 2 times, produce and deliver. Keeping in mind, we discussed the option of mass customization yesterday, okay, where we have a combination of push-pull. Now, if I have produce to stock or make to stock, is that push or pull? Are we producing in a push or in a pull environment here? Push or pull? The first one. Push, right? And then we have pull in the other one. So we produce to order, or we have the extreme case of, thank you very much, Xinglam, or we have the extreme case here of resource to order, right? Where I have to wait the whole time until the resources are obtained, they are produced, and then delivered. What were the example we gave for resource to order? Anybody remembers what was an example we gave here? We said, for example, building a skyscraper, right? Those things. Okay, we would not have necessarily all the material in our backlog, but we would have to purchase the material once we get the tender to build the skyscraper. Okay. So this is how we can potentially respond to demand, right? And here you see another graphical illustration. If I'm make to stock, make to order, or resource to order, right? When I order, right, that is dependent demand. When I make to stock, I have independent demand, right? So each product or service compared with total capacity of the operation, okay? So some of the activities we have in planning and control, we have something called loading, sequencing, scheduling, monitoring and control. So loading means how much I have to order. Sequencing means in what order do I produce. Scheduling means when do I do things in terms of the time. And then monitoring and control are the activities going on as planned. Okay. Right. Loading then is the amount of work that is allocated to a work center. So here you see an example. If my maximum available time that I will have at the workstation is potentially 68 hours, but then think about all the time that is lost for this hypothetical capacity of 68 hours. I have quality losses, slow running equipment, there might be breakdowns, setup changeovers, and there are things where we are not working and the equipment is idle, right? Can be idle because the other workstation is has less capacity than we have, so we have to wait. So there's idle time. So there's a difference between my design capacity, which is the maximum available time, and my rated capacity, where you actually have to subtract what we have. Okay. There's a calculation which is called the OEE. Okay. In that formula, we calculate and measure the effectiveness of equipment, right? So to what extent can we really achieve this design capacity? And to what extent do we need to subtract, right? So it's a way also to make investments to see if machinery is getting too old, right? Do I need to update it? When do I have to make investments to update it, right? And here you see the 3 performance aspects: stakes and the time. So the time for which the equipment will operate, which is a design capacity, and then you subtract, right, the speed and quality losses that you have. It basically looks like this, right? What are the speed losses? such as learning losses when you hire, for example, staff, or you have staff that are underperforming, or there are technology-related delays, or there are quality losses. Maybe there are reworks where you had faulty material coming in or coming out, complaints you have to handle, or you have to inspect, right? And then you can calculate the performance rate by the net operating time divided by the total operating time. And then the quality rate is the available operating time, again, divided by the net operating time this time, right? And the availability rate in the end is then the total operating time divided by the operating time, okay? When we go back, remember we had this, we had loading, which we just discussed, how much. Now we talk about sequencing, right? In what order to do things, okay? And there are multiple options, right? Depending on what we produce, right? There can be physical constraint. Think about, I don't know, the path dependency of building a house or the skyscraper, where you first have to build the foundation before you can put in the walls, or before you can put in the roof or the fixtures inside, the electrician can come in, yada, yada. Or there's customer priorities. Some customers are more important than others. Some customers pay more than others, so you do the job for that customer first. Or you assign a due date to it. The two other ones is LIFO and FIFO. So last item or first item coming out, right? So the last job's coming in, you do first, last item first, or first item first, right? These are other rules you can take. So when you have plastic, you do any molding of plastic, right? Let's say you do something like this, right? And then you usually have the granulat coming into huge containers, and then the things that come out closer to the nozzle come out firstly, right? So the last thing that entered the system will come out firstly naturally, right? But you can also assign that strategically. Then we can also set priority rules by longest operating time first or last, or shortest operating time last or first, depending on the job that we are doing. And then there are also judging, sequencing rules where you have any other priority rule you want to assign, okay? Now this graphical illustration is about how do I monitor and control my processes. And we already discussed this in terms of the push versus the pull, right? So push generally is an environment for what we call the functional product. So where I make a forecast and I focus on let's say managing the performance of the process at each workstation in terms of the utilization. So this person produces as much as possible, this person produces as much as possible, this and this. So they are not integrated, right? So, and if they don't go at the same speed, they accumulate inventory, right? WIP, work in progress. Whilst a more sophisticated approach, which could probably be more efficient, is to look at the pull system. So material is only moved to the next stage and produced when the signal comes in, right? So when this workstation needs more material, it gets delivered, it gets delivered, it gets delivered. So this is what we prefer in a lean environment. And the way we use it is through what it's called Kanbans, or signaling cards. So when this would signal to this workstation, I need more material, I need more material, I need more material. So there we would not view each performance in isolation, but in combination, right? So here we would take a systematic approach to the performance of the process. Okay. Now, what are the objectives of planning and control, right? The objectives are there to measure the capacity and the demand, identify alternative capacity plan, and choose the most appropriate capacity plan, right? Generally, if I have, I can estimate my current capacity, and then I can forecast the demand, right? So here you have a situation where your capacity is higher than the forecasted demand, which is the blue curve. So you could potentially then here overproduce and produce to stock and use that material in a later period. Can also be the other way around, right? That the demand is higher than the capacity, so I would be out of stock, right? So the only two or one place where we really have a match of supply and demand would be here, right? So there are different ways to plan the capacity. So we are here in an environment of capacity plans. And generally, we have two types of capacity plan. The first one, which is called level capacity, which is what is graphically illustrated here. Okay, so I keep the capacity the same throughout the year, right? So I may overproduce, I may underproduce, but my capacity is not flexible. I will not change it throughout the year. The opposite option of this is called chase demand. So that would entail that I would always adjust my capacity. So I would go down, go down, go down with my capacity, go slightly up with my capacity, and then I go down with my capacity. So I try to follow the demand curve. So my capacity is induced by flexibility. Right? So I can change the volume of that, right? How can I do that? Through, for example, overtime, running extra shifts, hiring temporary workers, outsourcing some of the production in high demand season. I could also plan to have extra operational buffers, such as having excess capacity, right? These could be options of making capacity more flexible. Generally, making capacity flexible is a more expensive approach if I only look in the form of utilization in comparison to level capacity, right? There's a third option, which is a bit different to those two ones, which is called demand management. So let's say, for example, you are producing outdoor furniture, right? Which are used for graduations, celebrations, weddings, and such, right? In a scenario like that for a product, you would have very seasonable demand, right? In the summer months, demand goes high, and in the other months, demand would go low, steadily lower. Now, what you would then try to do, if it is such an extreme case where you have like a bell curve, you can't do much from the capacity side in order to make the operations more efficient. But what you do is to work on the demand, to even out, to flatten out the demand curve. So to stimulate some demand outside those summer months through, I don't know, pricing and promotion, developing products, etc., where you have higher demand. On the other side, where you can then utilize your capacity more evenly and balance the capacity, right? So this is what we called, where am I? We are talking about capacity plan, right? And then we have to choose the most appropriate capacity plan, right? But the first point is very important. So where do I measure the capacity, right? Which is an important question. And the answer is, it's not on the input, it's not on the transformation, it's not on the output side. It depends. On what does it depend? It depends on where is the slowest part in the process. So in order to establish the capacity of a process, you need to measure the capacity in the whole process. Okay. Okay, let's continue. So let's look into process performance. As I said before, generally we look into process performance from two perspectives, right? From the efficiency side and from the effectiveness side, right? So efficiency is everything related to cost and time, and effectiveness is then everything else, right? Anything quality related that we have, right? Speed, safety, flexibility, or anything else. Now, think about what information we need to assess the efficiency of a process. So today, we will only focus on efficiency, right? You will, in other classes later on, focus on the effectiveness side, but now we only look into efficiency, okay? So one important performance-related measure of efficiency is the throughput rate. And the throughput rate is the average number of units processed per time in unit of time. Throughput rate, okay? Now, let's take an example, okay? We have task A, B, C, D. Sequential four-step process. Sorry, it doesn't matter. Now think about it. The process is in what we call steady state. That means the process is already running, okay? Now, if the throughput rate is, per definition, the average number of units that we can process per time, how much can we process per hour? So how many pizzas can we produce per hour? We say first one was making the dough, putting the toppings on the dough, right? Baking the pizza and then taking it out. How many pizzas? How many pizzas can we make per hour? Very simple. What do you think? Why 4? Why 4? The process is in steady state, means it's running. So there's something already here, something already here, something already here. The persons are running. It's very simple. It depends on the bottleneck, on the slowest step or activity in the process. Which one is the slowest in the process? A, B, C, or D? Which one is the slowest? A, B, C, or D? A, right? And then you can easily calculate, right? Because then you would only need to do, if you take it per hour, 60 divided by 5. So how many pizzas can we make per hour? We can make 12 pizzas per hour, right? So that would be the result of this one. That would be the throughput rate. Now, let's take another important measure, which is cycle time. So cycle time is the average time between the completion of the successive unit of a product. Okay, so in this case, or services of a process. So the average time between the departure of successive customers, if we look into service processes, right? So if I translate this into our pizza example, right? That would mean if I am at the end of this process, after D, I'm the customer. How many minutes do I have to wait until I receive my next pizza? Until I receive my next pizza? Until I receive my next pizza? So the time in between, right? So not the time it takes when the pizza comes out, but the time in between, right? That's the cycle time. The question is, how do I calculate the cycle time? It's the task time of the bottleneck. To make the pizza then here would be every 5 minutes, the pizza comes out. Every 5 minutes, the pizza comes out. Very simple. So the bottleneck is always the constraint in the system, in the process, which is here task A. The bottleneck can be also at task B, task C, task D. It just happens to be in the first task of making the dough. Okay. Then we have throughput time. And throughput time is then the average time a unit spends in the system, including all waiting time, right? So if we are here at the pizza example, how long would I need to take until I can make the next pizza? So I have the first task, I have 4 minutes, 5 minutes, then it takes me 4 minutes, so it's 9, then it's 11, then it's 14 minutes, right? So 14 minutes it would take me ideally to receive my pizza, okay? Then we have the capacity, and the capacity is what we said is the maximum output at the operation, at the workstation, at the process, or the facilities, right? In terms of the units produced or the customer that I serve. So for a specific time period, okay, it can be units manufactured per hour, customers served per hour, and the capacity is the inverse calculation of the cycle time. So you can calculate the capacity by taking 1 divided by the cycle time, or the cycle time by taking 1 divided by the capacity, right? Now, take this as an example now. This is relatively simple, but now we would like to establish the capacity, the overall capacity of our pizza making process, right? Now, if you take this process, right, you have to establish the capacity of A, capacity of task B, of task C, of task D. Now, can you tell me the overall capacity of pizza? Once you got it, type it in the chat. Take, I don't know, shouldn't take you more than 5 to 10 minutes. Okay? Try it out. Okay, so what's the capacity? How many pizzas can we make in this process? What do you guys think? So for task A, we can make 12 pizzas, right? So the capacity of task A is 12. No, not so many, unfortunately, Xinglang. In task B, we can make 15 pizzas. Task C can potentially make, I like this 12. How did you come to 12? Jawa Kwok. How did you come to 12? What's your rationale for 12? Explain to us. How did you come to 12? How did you come to 12? The smallest one, and the smallest is the constraint, right? No? Because what did we say? If we go back, how did we define capacity? It's the maximum output of the operation. And what does the maximum depend on? The maximum depend on the weakest link, right? The weakest link in our process is workstation A. So we have workstation A could potentially make 12. Task B could actually potentially make 15, but can never achieve 15. Why can it never achieve the 15? What do you think, guys? Why can it never make 15 pizzas per hour? Because it depends on task A, and task A can only do 12, right? That's right. Task C could even make 30 pizzas per hour, right? But can it ever make 30 pizzas per hour? No, because indirectly it depends on task A, which can only make 12 pizzas per hour, right? So it can never get to 30 pizzas. Even it has the capacity to make 30 pizzas, but its idle time is the highest. So task C always have to wait. Has nothing to do, has to sit there, nothing. Sorry, I can't make pizzas. Sorry, I can't deliver the pizza. Sorry, I can't put the pizza into the oven. Because the guy that makes the dough flat in task A needs too long, right? Same with D, right? So we could potentially give our customers 20 pizzas per hour, right? Now that would be great. So we could serve 20 pizzas per hour. But we will never be able to do so because the guy making the pizza dough can only make 12 per hour. Do you guys understand this? This is fundamental in process management. Do you get this? It's interesting if you think about it, right? So you would say, I could make much more, but you can't because you depend on each other and the process is in a sequence, right? That's why the overall capacity can only be 12 pizzas per hour, right? I can never achieve the 31. I can never achieve the 21. I can't achieve the 51. Now, if you think about it, where would you invest resources in this process in order to improve the performance of the process? Where would you invest in? Task A, B, C, or D. Where would you invest in to improve the performance of the process? A, right? Because there you need more capacity, right? Here you have too much capacity. Here you have too much capacity. Here you have too much capacity. So you need to somehow refer some capacity to task A, right? Now, if I would invest and make task C faster or task B or task D, would I be able to make more pizzas? No, because I still depend on these task A, which can only make the 12 pizzas. Okay. Right, guys, let's take a break. In Hong Kong now, it's 9:30, it's 4:30, right? Do I? Yes, right? So, I don't know, it's Friday. Let's take the last day. Let's take a 25 minutes break, okay? See you guys in 25 minutes. Have a nice coffee or tea or whatever you need. Or a pizza, right? We will continue with pizza baking after the break. See you guys. Okay, shall we start back? Okay. So let me just open where we left. I didn't share the screen. Here you go. So this is where we left with our pizza example, right? And then where we said this also answers the question of where should I measure my capacity, here at the input, at the transformation, or at the output side. You have to measure it basically everywhere, right? Because you need to know that the capacity is depicted by the weakest link in the chain, which is the task that takes the longest, which is then here task A. Okay, so it happened to be here that the capacity needed to be measured here at the input side on the left side, right? But it could also be here at the output side. Right, then we have some things called Little's law. It's like a very convenient calculation to calculating your WIP, right? Your work in progress. So the inventory that you accumulate here in between the steps. Because you will accumulate quite a lot, right? Because if the process is not balanced and not every step has its the same capacity, then it will be unbalanced, right? So how do we calculate this? So WIP is calculated then through throughput rate multiplied with throughput time. And I gave you an example here. So if you eat 1 apple per day, which is the throughput rate of 1 apple a day, right? And you have 10 apples, which is the WIP, and then you could just calculate how much and how long it will take the throughput time, right, with the 10 days, right? So it will take you 10 days to finish the apples, right? Because then if you take WIP 10 divided by the throughput rate is the 1 apple per day, 10 divided by 1 is 10, right? So that's the apple. We'll do some exercises with regards to this, and then you'll see it will be quite interesting. So how are these measures related to profitability? Obviously, it's related to profitability, what we saw in the picture example, that it affects your bottom line because it affects on what's your output, what you can potentially sell, okay? Now, let's go back again into managing processes from a capacity perspective. So we said capacity is the maximum level of value-added activity in an operation or a process. And then the constraint is then any factor that limits the performance of the whole system, right? So if we go here, the constraint is to increase the performance of this, I could increase the performance of the whole process. If I decrease the performance even more, so instead of 12 pizzas per hour, I can only process here 10 pizzas per hour. The whole process can only process 10 pizzas per hour, right? And that is then called a constraint. And it hinders the operation to reach its full capacity. Because as you see here, I have much more capacity, but I cannot use this capacity because this little feather here at the beginning is not fast enough to keep up with the demand of the other tasks. Okay. There are multiple, like there are physical constraints, which are the constraints in the machines, right? You can only process so and so much. Then there is a market constraint, which can be from the demand side, from the supply side, and then there are managerial constraints as well. There are such as rules of regulations. You can only work for 10 hours a day. You need so and so many breaks, yada yada. Okay. So one way to manage and improve the efficiency of processes is through bottlenecks, right? And the bottleneck is a capacity constraint in any stage of the process. It's the lowest capacity. So if we go here, what's the bottleneck in this process? What's the bottleneck? Which task is the bottleneck here? Where can we find the bottleneck? Come on, guys, you have to pay attention. Where's the bottleneck here? A, right? This is the slowest one. So that is the constraint in the system. So the bottleneck can be internally or externally, right? It can also be a supplier. So I can apply the principle of bottlenecks at the process level and also at the supply chain level. Okay. How do I identify a bottleneck? The bottleneck takes the longest time to process. It has the highest rate of utilization. So it will be running all the time to keep up with the rest, but it can't keep up with the rest, right? And a reduction in even a single minute in the processing time would reduce the average throughput time for the entire process. Okay. There's something called the theory of constraint, which is a continuous improvement program that tries to manage and improve processes through a systematic management approach that focuses on identifying the bottleneck, exploiting the bottleneck, elevating the bottleneck, subordinating other activities, and going back to the bottleneck. There is a video that explains this. We're going to have a quick look at this, which is quite interesting. Let me do it from the start, but I think the start is this.
For most manufacturing companies, meeting the ISO 9000 quality standard has been one of the most important steps ever taken to improve their manufacturing operation. But in most cases, business owners and stockholders are not satisfied merely by knowing that a company makes products with consistent quality. Business leaders know that the most important measure of any manufacturing company is continued profitability. And in most manufacturing operations, it is hard to have every single employee understand the company's financial performance or have the ability to improve it. To help everyone to understand profitability, Ellie Goldratt wrote a novel about a manufacturing operation that needed major improvements to avoid being shut down. This book, written in 1984, The Goal, sold millions of copies and popularized the theory of constraints. The novel was a simple way to introduce the theory of constraints to employees at all levels. But what is meant by a constraint? To find out, we asked Dr. David Berglund, a certified TOC trainer, to define what a constraint is.
The basic assumption of theory of constraints is that every organization exists to accomplish a goal. And typically the goal is to make more money now and in the future. And at any point in time, there's something that's limiting your ability to achieve more and more of your goal. And that something is what we call a constraint. Have to manage the constraints.
One key factor emphasized by the theory of constraints is how difficult it is to measure the impact that various divisions of a company have on its profitability. To help companies break out of the standard cost accounting methods, the theory of constraints measures financial performance using the throughput accounting concept.
So if we go, like I'm not gonna go into detail with the theory of constraint, but what's important is that the theory of constraint provides a systematic approach to measuring the performance of a process. And doing that, it focuses on three performance indicators. One is throughput. And the other one is operating expenses. And the third one is inventory, right? And that's in comparison to just focusing on efficiency, right? So here we look at how much can we sell, how much does it cost to convert my raw material into finished good, and how much inventory do I have, to provide a systematic approach of the performance of a process. Okay. So there are some key principles. So we balance the flow of the production and not the capacity, right? And we only build inventory in front of the bottleneck, in stages before the bottleneck. And we only produce when the bottleneck needs it. So theory of constraint is based on pull processes, right? And the activation of a non-bottleneck resource will not improve throughput. And every capital investment should be viewed then from a perspective of the bottleneck. So we need to improve the bottleneck before we can improve the performance of the rest of the process. Okay. So the practical implication is it goes through these 5 steps. So first you need to identify the bottlenecks. So you need to measure the capacity of a process and find the one that is the slowest. In the second step, we need to make sure that this bottleneck is running all the time. So it should be at least utilized 100% because it depicts the rate of the output of the whole process. Point 3 is to subordinate all other decisions to step 3. So then you can try, if possible, to use some resources that you have in different stages in the production process and support the bottleneck, right? You also only produce what you can actually use, right? So being again in the pull environment. And then in step 4, if needed, we need to make investments, but only at the bottleneck stage, right? Step 5, I quote here, do not let inertia set in, but it basically means I go back to step 1 and do the process ever again until my process is completely balanced, okay? We also have a principle based on the theory of constraint, but also based on lean manufacturing that's called the drum buffer rope, okay? And drum basically means that the bottleneck sets the speed, right? So the rest of the process goes to the speed of the bottleneck. And buffer means that before the bottleneck, I place strategically inventory to make sure that the bottleneck is utilized to 100%. And rope basically means it's a communication line to control the activities before the bottleneck. Okay, that principle is called drum buffer rope. Okay, now let's do some exercises and do some calculations based on what we've done here. Okay, so that we learn what we've done. Okay, now can you guys go to the learning materials area? And there's an exercise called point 5.1. You see here, very short, but nonetheless tricky. So there's an example. So every year was the same. All the workstations in the building had been renovated, tested, new software, yada, yada. There was only 1 week in which to do it. The 1 week fell in the middle of August, where it was vacation period, when the renovation process would cause minimum disruption. Okay. Live 100 workstation had all been renovated within 1 week, 40 hours. Each renovation last year took on average 2 hours, and 25 technicians had completed the process within the week. This year, we have 30 workstation more, right? 530 workstations, and they need to be renovated by the company's support unit to whatever faster testing, renovation routine that would only take 1.5 hours instead of the 2 hours. So my question is, how many technicians will be needed this year to complete the renovation process within 1 week? Okay, try it out. Take 15 minutes to calculate. Think about all the calculation that we've done before. Think about WIP, think about throughput, think about Little's law and whatever we had there, okay? Think about capacity. Okay, take 15 minutes. We'll see you in at 25 past. You can find this in the learning material, right? Under exercise session 5.1. Have you all found this? You all got this? Yes? Okay. Try your best. You can do it. I'm sure you can. There you go. Okay, how's it going, guys? Have you found a solution? Yes, no, no, yes. Do you have anything? Still thinking? Okay. You need some more time? Okay. So if you want, I give you some more time. I don't know. Okay, 10 more minutes. Would you like some help? Yes, no, no, yes. Well, I could help a little bit if you guys want. Would you be interested in help? Okay, I'll give you some hints. So let's calculate last year. Okay, let's do it what happened last year, not in this year. So the WIP we are dealing with here are the workstations, right? And we have, last year we had 500 workstations, okay? The time available is 40 hours or was 40 hours, right? The average time to renovate was, how many hours did it take? Average time to renovate? 2 hours, right? Then what's the throughput rate? It's simple, which is then 0.5 technicians. Right? And then we can use little law, which basically says that WIP equals the throughput rate multiplied with the time that is available. And then I can calculate N, or the number of technicians, which is 500 divided by 40 multiplied by 0.5, right? And then I have 25 technicians I need. Now you can do the same with this year, but the work in progress now is no longer 500 station, it's 530 station. The time available is the same, right? The average time to renovate is 1.5 hours. And then you can calculate how many technicians do we need. Okay? Yes? No? No, no, no? Okay. Digest. And after you've digested this, now try this year. I give you, take 20 minutes, okay? Take 20 minutes. I'm away, you do what you do. I make myself a coffee. Hey, does anybody have a result or anything to share, or do you need more time? How are you guys doing? So Xinglam, what do you have? How many technicians do we need for this year's renovation project? Correct. Does anybody else has this result? So I have rounded up 19.88, which is about 20 technicians, I'd say. Anybody else got this? Anybody? You can say no, it's fine. If you say no, I'll go through it step by step. You say nothing, I don't know whether you got it or not. No problem in say no, but just say something. You got it or not? No? So everybody has it? No. So somebody has it not. The rest of you already got this, right? Or no? Well, maybe we are the only three working on this. So let me explain this. So the WIP for this year is how many workstations? 530, right? Time available is 40 hours, right? Now, since due to the improvement, the average time to renovate is 1.5 hours. Now, the throughput rate is 1 divided by those 1.5 per technician, means we are at 0.67 technicians, right? Now, little law was WIP equals what? WIP equals, what was the formula? Time available multiplied by what? What do I need to multiply? With the throughput rate, right? That means, that means N equals 530 divided by 40 multiplied by 67. Right? 19.88, say 20 technicians. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Yes, right? No. So here you have the whole calculation if you want to follow this, right? WIP was 530, takes the time, 40 hours we have. Average time to renovate is 1.5. then we can calculate the throughput by 1 divided by the 1.5 technicians is 0.67 technicians. Then we calculate the throughput rate with the time available. And then if we take it over to the other side, then we have 530 divided by 40 multiplied by 67. So we have 19.88 technicians, right? Good. So there you can use the little law to calculate the amount of resources or technicians you have, okay? I also have it in a nicer form if you want to see it like this as a result. Let me see. So here you go. I can upload the result as well if you want me to. Right? Okay, can we continue? Are we happy with this? Not really, but at least happy enough so we can continue. Okay. Let's do one more. And then we do some closing comments. Okay. Now go back to your learning material, and there's I know there's like a last exercise which I have here, which is sort of around, right? So let me see if I can get it. So vehicle licensing center receives application documents. So where you register your car, right? Keys the details, check the information provided in the application, classifies the application according to the type of the license required, right? Confirm payment and then issue and mails the license. It is currently processing at an average rate of 5,000 licenses every day or every 8-hour shift. So then a recent check found that 15,000 applications that were in progress or waited still needed to be processed. So 15,000 are not finished, I put it this way, right? The sum of all activities that are required to process an application is 25 minutes, okay? Now you need to calculate the throughput efficiency of the process, okay? Try your luck, 10 minutes. If you want, why don't you start firstly with just calculating the throughput time, right? Just the throughput time. After the throughput time, we discuss together how we can calculate the efficiency. So for the throughput time, you just need, again, a little law, okay? Whoever has a result, just send it in the chat, okay? Good luck. Just the throughput time. Anybody got anything? So think about, we can still or use again little law, right? And with little law, we can calculate throughput time by multiplying the WIP with the cycle time, okay? What's the WIP here in this scenario? That's the first thing you need to figure out. What's the work in progress? Correct. The WIP are the 15,000 applications, right? That's the WIP. Now, the cycle time is basically the amount of time that we are producing, right? And we can just calculate that by taking the time producing and divide that by the number that we have produced, right? And that means 8 hours divided by those 5,000 licenses. So if I scale that to minutes, that's 480 minutes divided by 5,000, which equals then 0.096 minutes, right? And with this now, you can calculate the throughput time, okay? So let me know once you got the throughput time. Just type it in the chat. Anybody got the throughput time? What's the throughput time? Okay, I'll give you 5 more minutes. It's not a problem. You take your time, guys. Okay, we got some results which are correct, right? So we need to multiply 15,000, right, with the 0.096 that we calculated, which is minutes, right? Which is 24 hours. If it's an 8-hour working day, that means 3 days of work. Okay. Now we have the throughput time. And now we think about throughput efficiency. And throughput efficiency is calculated by work content. And we divide that with the throughput time. Okay. What is the work content? So these are all the activities related to working on one application. How long does it take to finish one application if I would constantly be working and nothing else? How long does it take? It says in the case. How long does it take? 25 minutes, right? So what do I have to do? I take the 25 minutes and divide them by the 1,440 minutes, right? And what do I have then? What's the result here? What's the result? So we say the main job in the vehicle licensing center is to process these applications, right? They have other jobs to do, type in the detail, check information provided, classify application, yada, yada. Drink a coffee, have a Danish, whatever. So 25 minutes means the amount of time that I'm working on this application, right? So if you think about 8-hour shifts, they have to do multiple things, right? But working 25 minutes, what do they do with the rest of the time? So we are looking at now of throughput efficiency. How efficient are they working on their throughput, right? So as I said, they could be doing multiple things. They could look outside the window and see how the birds are flying around, right? They could have a coffee. They could work on different tasks. So I'm looking at the efficiency of working on processing the applications, right? So what's the result here? 25 divided by 1,440 minutes. So then you, Xinglan, then you take that and now multiply this with 100. What's then the result? What number do I get? I get numbers. I know it's Friday evening, but I think you get this, right? You get 1.74%. That means, in the end, the applications are only been worked on for 1.7% of the time that they are in the process. So the application entered the process, but they're only truly been working on at 1.74% of the time. So on an 8-hour shift, we would only be working on the processing the application 1.4 hours if the 8 hours is the 100%. You got this? You understand? Yes, no, no, yes. Say yes, please. Not so sure. Okay. Okay, if you guys want, we can revise this in the last session more, okay? But let me share screen and then we can do like a recap of what we done today, okay? Not really. So if you guys didn't understand it, I will put up the solutions on the Brightspace page and you can have a look, okay? But generally the calculations are easy because it's just one formula. It's just a little loss formula. You only need to think about what's the WIP here, right? So I'll put all the results that you need there, okay? Could we just please revise on what I think is important for the exam and then we can move on, okay? So what do you need to remember for the exam, okay? You need to remember what is planning and control, right? What does it mean? And here you see the difference in planning and control is in the time horizon. The planning is what I do in the future. The control is what I do now, okay? You also need to remember this. We've discussed this at length before, the make to order, make to stock, resource to order. The advantages and disadvantages and the trade-off between cost and time, i.e. flexibility, okay? I will not ask you about this. I will not ask you about this. I will not ask you about this. I will ask you about throughput rate. I will ask you about cycle time. I will ask you about throughput time. I will ask you about capacity and Little's law, okay? So it would be great if you could remember this, okay? On the Brightspace page, there is a little case that I put there, okay, which is called Arapu, okay? Now, I know it's Friday evening and you are probably not particularly interested in reading it now, which is fine, okay? But can you at any stage have a look at this? Maybe on the right, have a look at this and revise this a little bit and think about these 3 questions that we have there. The operational objectives, what are the main problems, how could the process be improved, okay? Now, let's go just one more time into our syllabus, sorry. Your study guide and see where we're at and what we've done and what we still need to do, okay? Sorry for scrolling through. But here's what we did. So we've done all the sessions with me at the beginning. You got the introduction, the strategy, the process design, design of product services, and capacity management. Dr. Tim will then take over in 2 weeks, okay, where you have inventory management. So in the slide deck for me, you also have the inventory management, just disregard it. You only done with me till capacity management. He will take over with inventory management, okay? Then in the last class, we will do some revision. You can write me emails, things that you have not understood or where you still have some doubts, and I will clarify it in the class. The presentation of the groups will be in April, so you still have some time to go. And I will notify you and send you some information about this as well. Okay, if you have any questions regarding your projects or what you're going to present, just write me an email or ask Dr. Tim, okay? I will stop this now today because I know you've been working very hard and some things were probably difficult for you guys. now relax, okay? As I said, in the next couple of days, I will upload the results and give you some additional information and some additional exercises if you want, okay? That was it for me today. So my email address you can have here. Here's my email address. Just drop me a note whenever you want. You can also contact me here via the Brightspace page, okay? Whatever you need, let me know and I'll help you, okay? It was a pleasure being with you this week. I know it was tough, but I hope you learned something and you at least enjoyed it a little bit, because I did, okay? I thank you very much, guys, and anything you need, just drop me an email. I'm here to help you guys, okay? Thank you, guys. Have a great weekend, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again when we do the presentation. Okay? Thank you, guys. Have a great evening, and yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate that you were in my class. Thank you.